The Volkswagen van of the 1960s, painted with flowers and peace signs. Perhaps this is the perfect icon for progressivism. The kids who got into these vans weren't just leaving home, they were leaving behind the culture of their parents, their values, their traditions, to create a new world, a better world. So what do you think? Did it work? Is this a better world? Or have we become more selfish, more self-absorbed people? Now, however you answer that question, I think depends greatly upon one important thing. But first, as always, we start with our mission. Always remember, God created us for this time and for this place. If we learn this faith, if we live this faith, if we share this faith, what will the next 100 years look like? Join the mission. Some weeks ago, my pastor was preaching on the sacrament of marriage, and of the whole homily, one line jumped right out at me. He said, "Divorce is a pandemic." Now, I spent a lot of time thinking about that one line. Now, perhaps a few years ago, it wouldn't have affected me so much. But now, that word pandemic has become so much more meaningful. We understand this idea of an illness that starts and then spreads, eventually infecting a whole society. So while reflecting on that one line, divorce is a pandemic, it occurred to me, if you're my age, if you grew up in the 80s or maybe the 90s, maybe you can relate that for many of us, looking back on our family trees, we don't see any divorce, not anywhere. Well, not until we get to the 70s and the 80s. And then after that, it explodes into our families like a pandemic. And then consequently, throughout the whole culture. Now, this homily just happened to be at a traditional Latin Mass. And while I was listening to these words and thinking these thoughts, this is what I was holding in my hand. This is an actual 1945 missal. This is not a reprint. And what is significant about this missal is that it was not given to me by my family. This is not a Shapezi family heirloom. It was a gift given to me by a teacher. And ironically, she was a Protestant. But in 1945, her family was Catholic. And after leaving the church, this no longer had any meaning for her. So in 1988, she gave it to me, knowing that I was a Catholic. Now, in 1988, I had no idea what this was. I was completely disconnected from this tradition, so I stuck it on a bookshelf where it collected dust for over 20 years. Now, this is significant because tradition is ordinarily passed on through marriage. Marriage serves as a mechanism for teaching the next generation how to live, what is good, what is true, and what is beautiful. Now, this mechanism, it's not just built into our biology, it's also present in our revelation, in the first commandment that God gave us to our first parents: be fruitful and multiply. And after they sinned, these words become all the more significant because death was introduced. They were going to die. And whatever truth, whatever goodness that they had in the intimacy of that garden, in order for that truth and goodness to be perpetuated throughout the ages, they would have to have children and pass on that truth. They would have to teach their children from father to son, from mother to daughter, or else that truth from the garden would be lost forever. So through the mechanism of marriage and of childbirth, through education, what we call tradition, the truth of who God is has been passed down from the garden, through the patriarchs, through the law, through the prophets, and through the church, to our own age here and now. But throughout all of these ages, there have been numerous social revolutions that sought to break this chain. The Reformation, the Enlightenment, the French Revolution, 19th century ideologies such as nationalism, the rise of racism, communism, the world wars, the sexual revolution. The list can go on and on and on. But for us, the one that I think has had the greatest impact on us, those of us who grew up in the 80s and the 90s and after, I think there is probably no more significant social revolution than the free love movement of the 60s. From that movement, hedonism has spread across the earth, destroying the institution of marriage. and the birth of children. And without a next generation, the truth of who God is cannot be passed on. When they separated us from our heritage, the tangible heirlooms of our past, our rightful inheritance, they robbed us of the reality that God is real, that he truly exists, that he has saved us, that while this world is fallen, we have a real and true hope in his generous mercy. Now this is my grandfather's watch, and this is my grandmother's rosary. And in this old box, I have a number of these old heirlooms. Now I ask you your opinion. Do I have the right to pawn this watch? Can I sell this rosary? Can I make the decision that this watch, it's too old-fashioned? Today we have better watches. We have smart watches. So this old thing, it has to go. Now legally, these things are mine. They belong to me. So technically, I have the right to pawn them. But would I be doing an injustice to the next generation? Because technically, these belong to this family. I'm just the custodian. And I have a responsibility to the family, to the family alive here and now, and the family that will come after me, to preserve these things in the condition that they were handed to me. Think about this. This is a hard thing to say out loud, especially if we are talking about people who we all know and we love. But when that generation got into these Volkswagen vans and traveled across the country engaging in the free love movement, were they honoring the tradition handed on to them? Were they being good custodians of the family's heritage? When they got off those vans, did they have anything left to pass on to the next generation? When they got on those vans, divorce almost virtually didn't exist. But when they got off those vans, not only was divorce a common practice, but so was birth control and then Roe versus Wade. We, their children and grandchildren, we were due to receive from them our family heritage. But what we received instead was single-parent homes and keys tied around our necks. Our fathers did not pass on the tradition that they received because there were no fathers to pass anything on. So I ask, did they have the right to get on those vans? Did they have the right to engage in that free love movement? Perhaps it made sense to them at the time. Perhaps they had a lot of fun. But what was the cost? And who had to pay it? We, their children and grandchildren, got robbed of our heritage. So did the free love movement make our society better? There's only two answers to that question, either yes or no. And your answer depends only on one thing. Do you believe that the deposit of faith should be perpetuated in every generation? This new world doesn't view us this way. It views each of us as a problem that takes up too much space or too many resources. If we are not somehow useful, then it'd be better if we weren't ever born.